Good evening, everyone. Welcome once again to Bhagavad-gita Satsang. I'm Hari-kirtana, and it is a great pleasure for me to be here with you. It is a great honor for me, for you to be here with me. Thank you very much for choosing to spend your time with me. And if you would be so kind, let me know that you can hear me by raising your hand. For those of you who are in attendance, thank you very much. It's very nice to see you all here. Greetings and greetings to all of you who are on the way or watching or listening to this recording after the fact. We will take care of our usual little bit of housekeeping. For those of you who are new to the satsang, you can adjust your audio settings and your viewing options up in the upper right-hand corner. No need to worry about your mic or video camera. You can see and hear me, but I do not see or hear you. But if you want to be heard, you can type a question or a comment into the Q&A box, and I will keep my eye on that. Actually, I will be sitting on the edge of my seat, anxiously awaiting your questions and comments, which I look forward to. Our last class, we are in chapter 8, the yoga of attaining the supreme, and we spoke about how to meditate on the supreme person. We spoke about yoga mishra bhakti, devotional meditation in combination with mystic yoga, and we covered verses 8 through 14. In tonight's class, we're going to look at the Gita's calculations of space-time. They're pretty far out, so big fun coming up here. We'll also look at how Krishna describes the transmigration of souls on a cosmic scale. Previously, he has spoken about how an individual comes into being, or at least is manifested in the material world, stays for some time, and then goes out of being. But here he will speak about this same process, but on a much larger scale. And we'll look at Krishna's description of a one-way trip to the supreme destination. So that's what's in store for us this evening. We will start with our invocation mantra. For those of you who are new, the dot over the M in Om indicates that you will close your lips and the back of your tongue to the back of the roof of your mouth at the same time, almost like wrapping your mouth around a walnut. The bars over the A's indicate a long open vowel sound. This would be true for any vowel that the bar is over, in this case, a pair of A's. So I'll speak a little bit more about the diacritical marks that indicate pronunciation for transliterated Sanskrit when we get to the verses we will chant this evening. For now, I will chant, you can chant back. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay, we're going to look at verses 15 through 22, but first, I have a question for you. How do you respond to chaos? Whenever I think of chaos, I think of Get Smart, the comedic, the sitcom of the 1960s. If I remember correctly, the evil organization that needed to be stopped by secret agents 86 and 99 was called Chaos, but with a K. Anyway, it tells you something about my material conditioning and my age, I suppose. I've been thinking more about the time in between the past and the future, otherwise known as the present, which by itself might seem relatively benign. In fact, we hear a lot of encouragement in yoga to stay in the present moment. And the present moment can be a really scary place if that present moment is between, is a transitional stage. In Sanskrit, a sandhya is a juncture between events or between periods of time. So I've been thinking about this in the following context. When the world that we've known and trusted is vanishing before our eyes, and a new world is coming towards us, and we don't know what it looks like. There's uncertainty. We just know that it won't be the same. It won't be the familiar, comfortable thing. Well, we feel threatened by the unknown. So the space in between the familiar past and the mysterious future is often one of disorder. That is to say, if the world is crumbling, then we have chaos. Or if the culture is changing, then we have chaos. If what seems to be coming down the pike is unfamiliar, new, and what is familiar is crumbling, giving way, then what we have is this chaos that gives rise to new forms. And then we wonder, what are these forms going to end up like? What forms from the past will survive in the future? What might we recognize in the future, or what might recognize us? So the question is, how should we respond to chaos? Should we try to stop the future from coming? Should we turn on, tune in, and drop out? Should we build a wall? A great wall, a beautiful wall. How do you respond to chaos? How should Arjuna respond to chaos? People generally don't like to hear that the old world is vanishing and the new world is coming. It's discomforting. It's actually giving Arjuna a nervous breakdown because his world is in a state of chaos. And that's just not comfortable. And here's the thing. Faith invites those who are willing to be uncomfortable rather than those who are anxious to be hypnotized by a false sense of security. This is the challenge of faith. The tough love of sacred texts are not welcomed by those who want to find comfort and stability in a material world that is subject to perpetual change, that by its very nature is not stable. And that's unfortunate because it's these sacred texts that offer us an opportunity to get underneath the issues that seem to be floating on the surface of this chaos. And underneath those issues is the place where we find the kind of transformative power that will help us actually move through that chaos. And I'm bringing this up because we're going to look at tonight's verses from a couple of different perspectives. One of them being, how do you respond to chaos? Last week's key verse is the final verse of the segment. O son of Prita, for one whose mind is continually immersed in remembrance of me, who is united with me through constant absorption in me, I am easy to obtain. So Krishna has identified himself as the ultimate goal of meditation, the supreme person. And he is has summarized once again that one who makes him the object of their meditation and who gets to a point where their mind is completely 100% absorbed in Krishna without any deviation, such a person easily obtains Krishna. Of course, being in that state and getting to that state is not necessarily particularly easy, but once there, Krishna assures the yogi and us that he is easily acquired. So from here, we will read the translations for the verses in this next section, and then, as is our usual MO, we will go back to each verse and look at it in detail. So, this week's verses, beginning with chapter 8, text number 15. Upon reaching me, so remember, we left off with, I'm easy to obtain, I am easy to get to, in 14. Now in 15, Krishna says, upon reaching me, these great souls never again take birth in this transient place of sorrows, for they have attained the highest perfection. Text 16. O Arjuna, all realms of material existence, from this earth to the world of Brahma, are places of repeated birth and death. But one who reaches me, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. Text 17. Those who understand the truth about day and night know that Brahma's day lasts for 1,000 ages, and that his night ends after the passage of yet another 1,000 ages. Text 18. At the dawn of Brahma's day, all beings emerge from the unmanifested state. With the arrival of Brahma's night, they are absorbed once again into the unmanifest. Text 19. Over and over, all are helplessly annihilated with the arrival of Brahma's night, only to come into being once again upon the commencement of Brahma's day. Text number 20. Beyond this, there is yet another unmanifest state of being that is eternal and transcendental. When all who are in this world vanish, that part remains as it is. Verse 21. The unmanifest realm, or that unmanifest realm, is said to be infallible and is known as the ultimate destination, the place from which, having attained it, one never returns. That is my supreme abode. Text 22. O Partha, Arjuna, the Supreme Person, the greatest of all, who enters into everything and within whom all the worlds reside, is attainable by unalloyed devotion. All right, so there we have our set of verses for this evening. And now let's take a closer look at our verses. So we begin with, upon reaching me, these great souls never again take birth in this transient place of sorrows, for they have attained the highest perfection. So here, Krishna characterizes the material world as a place of sorrows, a place of transience, coming and going. Nothing stays. Everything that one has is eventually lost, only to be replaced by something else. And it is this perpetual cycle of gain and loss that is the cause of these sorrows. We strive for something that we think will make us happy, and the striving itself is can be a source of difficulty. We can perhaps keep something for some time, and then loss of that thing or person makes us sorrowful. So in the next 4 verses, Krishna is going to describe the details of this transient place of sorrows in cosmic scale. That is to say, time, space, and the cycle of repeated birth and death, and how they're all related to one another. So let's go back. I will once again share my screen with you. We will chant verse 16. A little more about the diacritics, the markings that indicate the pronunciation of this verse. At the end of the first line, you'll see a dot under the H at the end of a word, at the end of a line, which means a short version of whatever vowel precedes that H will be echoed back. So in this case, we have a long A, but the A that echoes back will be a short version of that A. The apostrophe right before the R in Arjuna, in the second line, at the end of the second line, indicates that the vowel at the end of the word that precedes it will be joined directly to this last word. And a vowel has been dropped out, in this case, A. It is Arjuna's name. And that is all we need to know for the diacritics for this verse. So I will chant, and then you can chant back. Brahma bhuvana lokaha punar arvartinorjuna mamupetya tu kaunteya punar janma na vidyate. And the translation once again, O Arjuna, all realms of material existence, from this earth to the world of Brahma, are places of repeated birth and death. But one who reaches me, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. So, this verse may also be understood to indicate not just from the earth to the world of Brahma, but all worlds in the material cosmic manifestation. From the highest planet down to the lowest is another way that this verse is translated, indicating the complete spectrum of planetary systems as understood by the Vedic system, which looks like this. So here you have an illustration of one universe among unlimited material universes. And you will see that there is a sphere within the egg-shaped or oblong kind of sphere. And at the very top of that sphere is Brahma, the first created being in the universe, according to the Vedic understanding of how the universe comes into being and its sequence. And all the different planetary systems are on planes that have 3 sections: an upper planetary system, a middle planetary system, and a lower planetary system. And then at the bottom of this material universe, we see Lord Vishnu lying down on the Garbhodak ocean, fills the very bottom of the universe. He's lying on a raft made of the coils of the snake, Anantashesh, which is yet another expansion or incarnation, expansion in this case, of Vishnu. And the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi Devi, is also there. So we have the feminine aspect and the masculine aspect present, entering into each universe. And from this form, the Supreme Person enters into each atomic particle of matter within the universe and within the heart of each and every individual living being. So here you have the layout of the universe that Krishna is referring to when he speaks about the planetary systems from the Earth, which is in the middle planetary system, all the way up to Brahma. One translation really doesn't mention the lower planetary systems because it's already understood that nobody wants to go down to a lower status of life. One aspires to rise always to a higher status of life. So therefore, someone who is interested in karma, that is to say, acting in such a way as to get promotion to heavenly planets, is going to want to take the up escalator or elevator, not the down. And what Krishna is telling us here is that all of these places, however good they may look, they still have this feature of transience, of repeated birth and death, and therefore are also places of sorrow. Therefore, the idea here is to aspire to them is to gain only fleeting happiness. Therefore, not recommended. Krishna will now transition to something about time after having spoken about space. And we will chant this verse as well. The dot under an N indicates once again, a closed sound on either end. So it's more in the back of your mouth rather than just right tongue behind your teeth. So the third word of the second line will have this dot under the N, and everything else we have already explained. So here we go. Sahasra yuga paryantam aharyad brahmano viduhu ratring yuga sahasrantam teho ratra vidho janaha. And the translation once again, O Arjuna, all realms of material existence, from this earth to the world of Brahma, are repeated, places of repeated birth and death. But no one who reaches me, O son of Kunti. Oh, I'm sorry. But one who reaches me, O son of Kunti, never takes birth again. Now, wouldn't it be nice if this was actually the translation? But it's the translation to the previous verse. I knew you wanted to hear it again, and I just wanted to make sure you were paying attention. So I purposely forgot to put the correct translation, which actually is, those who understand the truth about day and night know that Brahma's day lasts for 1,000 ages, and that his night ends after the passage of yet another 1,000 ages. Time, as promised. So here's a look at Brahma's day. Not what he's doing all day, but how long his day lasts. A day of Brahma is composed of cycles of kalpas, or rather the lifespan of the universe. A kalpa is a day of Brahma. And one day of Brahma consists of 1,000 cycles of 4 yugas or ages. So here's how it breaks down. One kalpa is 4.32 billion years, and that's how long Brahma's day is, and then his night is of equal duration. You put together 100 years of such days and nights, and you end up with 311.04 trillion years, and that's the lifespan of Brahma, which is also the lifespan of the universe. So a day of Brahma is also divided up into what are called manvantaras. That is to say, there are different sections of the day, and there are different partial devastations of portions of the universe at different points of time in just one of Brahma's days. And finally, we get yugas. So a set of 4 yugas lasts for 4.32 million years. The first of these yugas, or seasons, you can think of them as seasons of time. So Satya Yuga, springtime, lasts 1.728 million years. This particular season of time is characterized by virtue and wisdom. There's practically no ignorance or vice. In the Treta Yuga, which is the next season, summer, let's say, 1.3 million years or thereabouts, vice is introduced. Things start to go downhill. Dwapara Yuga follows for 864,000 years. There is an even greater decline in virtue. And by the time we get to Kali Yuga, the winter of seasons, we have an abundance of strife, ignorance, and an absence of righteousness. This season of time lasts for 432,000 years, of which 5,000 have passed. Yes, the bad news is we are living in Kali Yuga. Here's Brahma, hanging out on his lotus. We'll come back to him in just a moment. Meanwhile, let's look at our next verse. At the dawn of Brahma's day, all beings emerge from the unmanifest state. With the arrival of Brahma's night, they are absorbed once again into the unmanifest. So here we have all this time relative to earthly solar calculations, during which Brahma has one day. We have a gazillion lifetimes. We enter into a body, we live for some time, we go out of this body. Maybe we take a birth that lasts for a very short period of time. Maybe we take a birth that lasts for a relatively long period of time. But compared to Brahma's day, unless we find ourselves very, very elevated to Brahma's planet, basically, we don't have a lifespan that even approaches Brahma's lifespan. And in our next verse, Krishna tells us, over and over, all are helplessly annihilated with the arrival of Brahma's night, only to come into being once again upon the commencement of Brahma's day. So here we have transmigration of the soul on a cosmic scale. All beings over a vast period of time, coming and going and coming and going and coming and going and coming and going. Ultimately, when Brahma's life is finished altogether, everyone remains unmanifest for millions and millions of years until the next cosmic manifestation is in session. And then everyone is back. Once the complete material world is back in session, then we go through the same thing, coming and going and coming and going and coming and going again and again. And in this way, we wander through the material world for what seems like an eternity. In fact, a person or a jiva, an individual spirit soul who is in the material world, is said to be eternally situated here, because there's no way to trace out when did this begin for us. So now Krishna is going to give us options. That is to say, there's something beyond this material world and this cycle of over and over again coming into being, going out of being. So text 20 once again. Beyond this, there is yet another unmanifest state of being that is eternal and transcendental. When all who are in this world vanish, that part remains as it is. So here, unmanifest means that this world is imperceptible to material consciousness. So there's two meanings to unmanifest. One, not in session, not active. The other is invisible, not accessible. So this spiritual realm of which Krishna is speaking is simply not accessible to one possessed of material consciousness. The Sanskrit word avyakta is being used in a couple of these verses, and that's a word that means unmanifest. However, we have to remember that Sanskrit is a contextual language. So avyakta in verse 18 refers to Brahma when he's asleep. Brahma himself is unmanifest. We are unmanifest when we are sleeping. That's one way to think about what does that mean to be unmanifest. In verse 20, where we are now, avyakta refers to the unmanifest as in a spiritual world that is imperceptible to one who lacks spiritual vision, whose senses are material. That doesn't mean that nothing's going on there, or that it has no form or no identifiable characteristics. It simply means that we can't experience it. Krishna goes on to further elaborate on this unmanifest spiritual realm. Text 21, that unmanifest realm is said to be infallible and is known as the ultimate destination, the place from which, having attained it, one never returns. That is my supreme abode. So here's Krishna in the material world speaking to Arjuna, letting him know that while he manifests his presence in the material world and his activities, which he has already described as transcendental, along with his very form, at the same time, he is residing in a supreme abode that is unmanifest, which is to say, inaccessible to those of us who do not have the consciousness that would allow us to perceive it and participate in the activities that take place there. We have to assume that activities take place there because Krishna has established himself as a person. The Param Atma, or the supreme Purusha. And to be a person means to be in relationship to other people, which means you have to have an environment within which activities, relationships with other people take place. So this realm that Krishna is describing is the realm of spiritual relationships. Only a small hint of Krishna's personal abode is being given here in the Bhagavad-gita. There is another yoga wisdom text called the Brahma Samhita, that is to say, the Song of Brahma, which describes the spiritual kingdom of Krishna in vivid detail. And I wholeheartedly recommend that you avail yourself to this wonderful text, Brahma Samhita. Text 22. O Partha, Arjuna, the Supreme Person, the greatest of all, who enters into everything and within whom all the worlds reside, is attainable by unalloyed devotion. So here, Krishna is speaking about himself in the third person. When he speaks of Ishvara or Paramatma, the Vishnu expansions that are responsible for the creation of the entire material cosmic manifestation, the maintenance of each individual universe within that cosmic manifestation, and who enters into each atomic particle and of that creation and the heart of all beings in that creation, Krishna tends to speak of himself in that role in the third person to indicate a different kind of relationship. But then when he speaks about himself, he is also retaining that position as the Supreme Person, and yet going into an even deeper level of personal relationship from his personality as Krishna. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, and Shanna, thank you for yours, we're going to go there in just a few moments, or close to there. Let's go back and once again take a look at some visuals. So here we have Brahma hanging out on his lotus flower, which is the shape of his abode. And you can see Brahma's position, seated on the lotus that is extending from the navel of Lord Vishnu, who we saw earlier, lying down on the bed of the snake. And here we have him again, lying down on basically a raft made of coils of the thousand-headed serpent. And that scene takes place in each of the universes, as illustrated here, that are being generated, that are emanating from the form of Mahavishnu, the great Vishnu who lies down in the causal ocean, that portion of the spiritual world that is reserved for the material world, of which Krishna has spoken as being a place of transience, a place of sorrow. And that entire cosmic manifestation, the manifestation of all the material universes that come and go and come and go and come and go, takes place in one portion of a complete spiritual environment, pictured here as all of the different realms of different forms of the Supreme Person, and one primary location where Krishna, in his form as Krishna, has relationships with those who are devoted to him. Here pictured with Radharani, understood as his own internal energy, and her own expansions, the gopis. So here we have a god who dances, which is totally cool. And here we have, once again, the big picture of the complete universe as understood from the Vedic tradition, of which Krishna is referring. And that's what the whole thing looks like when you put it all together. The material universe is below, and the infallible spiritual realm above. So it looks very much like what Krishna has done here is given us a formula for checking out, for climbing up the ladder of transcendence, leaving the material world behind in favor of pure spiritual existence. In Krishna's own personal special abode, reserved for those who are devoted to him. And what does that have to do with us and our life here and now? So now I want to circle back to chaos. Remember, Arjuna's life is in chaos. And Krishna is not just telling him to check out. Because if he was, he would have said, you know what? Yeah, go to the forest. That's a good idea. Meditate and just get yourself out of here. Forget about this mess. Just, tune in, turn on, drop out. Don't even need to build a wall. But that's not what's going to happen. Krishna is going to say, here is the truth about the world and the nature of loss and sorrow in the material world. And here is where the yogis go to bail. And now you have to go fight. You have to deal with the chaos. You can't just check out. So these verses are not just a formula for turning our backs on the material world and letting someone else worry about it. The contemporary relevance of these verses is that devotion to the one who is within the chaos and within whom the chaos resides is the way to move through the chaos. I've spoken before about how the Bhagavad-gita is meant to be taken literally. And it also has symbolic meaning. And those two things are not mutually exclusive. One does not cancel out the other. In fact, they're mutually informing. And both of them are required in order to have a complete understanding of the Gita and how to respond to the Gita's message. So, on the one hand, we do want to know how to climb the ladder of transcendence. After all, we're eternal spiritual beings having a temporary material experience. And we want to get back to our true nature. That is why we practice yoga. Yoga is the stilling of the mind, the stilling of the chaos that allows us to experience ourselves as we truly are. So how do we respond to all this chaos that just won't be still? The chaos that is not just in our minds, but in the world that we inhabit. What Krishna is giving us here are keys to compassionate detachment from that which will inevitably be lost. And keys for understanding disruptions in our lives as divine benevolence. Now, this is really challenging. I find it challenging even for little things, to say nothing of when inevitably something major happens that disrupts my life. And you may be experiencing something right now that is a major disruption to your plan of what you thought your life was going to be, of how you thought things were going to go. And if you're not, You will. Because that's what happens here in the material world. Let's talk for a moment about the world we live in. If we're here in America, then we are essentially dealing with consumer culture. And the myth of consumer culture is that we will all go from triumph to prosperity and ease without the experience of brokenness, without losing anything. In the mythical world of consumer culture, everything just always gets better. And the more stuff that we consume, the better it gets. And this is nonsense, because all of us, sooner or later, experience brokenness that the acquisition, that the consumption of material stuff simply won't repair. So we need something on a deeper level. So how do we step out of this illusory and self-defeating culture? We do it by truthfulness. One of the guiding principles of yoga, one of the 4 pillars of Dharma. We talk about reality. You can get really unpopular by talking about reality. Nevertheless, that's what we have to do. These sacred texts, like the Bhagavad-gita, are intentionally disruptive. They oblige us to face what we seek to avoid, namely loss, brokenness, the absence of control, the inability to consume our way to happiness. Now, there are 2 different kinds of disruptions, a negative disruption and a positive disruption. We call negative disruptions curses, and materially positive disruptions miracles. Now, they're both sacred. And the challenge is in finding or feeling the sacred in the negative disruptions. There are verses like these that challenge us to see how an inherently sacred negative disruption will lead us to a deeper level of spiritual experience that ultimately takes us to God's state of being, which is the state of being that transcends disruption. That's the transformative power of a sacred text. There are, now I've mentioned sacred texts. So in addition to the Bhagavad-gita, there are other texts that speak about sacred disruptions. The prophecies of the Old Testament, for example. If you go to Jeremiah, you can there you will find passages that deal with loss, with disruption, with the destruction of the world, with chaos, basically. And if you look in Isaiah, you will find prophecies of hope, prophecies of what is yet to come. And the encouragement to have faith in what is to come as something that is for our benefit. So in the Bhagavad-gita, the destruction of Arjuna's world is analogous to our great moments of loss, be they personal or social. In the Old Testament, there is the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. In our contemporary lives, for most of us, 9/11 is the moment where we thought what couldn't possibly happen here actually does happen. And it disrupted everything. And we are still experiencing the after effects of that disruption. The chaos of that event is still very much present in our lives. And material culture, especially consumer culture, renders us ill-equipped to handle loss. And hence, our preferred response to chaos is denial. Our preferred response to the disappearance of the world that is familiar to us is to cling to it by whatever means we can, rather than accept that that's the nature of this world. Spiritual understanding empowers us to accept and move through loss. Arjuna will be motivated by devotion to Krishna rather than the fulfillment of his material desires by the time we get to the end of the Gita. And thus he will be empowered to fight through the chaos from a position of spiritual awakening that transcends the chaos he is fighting through. And the Bhagavad-gita is not just spoken for Arjuna's benefit, but for our benefit as well. Arjuna is our role model. We seek to follow in his footsteps, hearing the Bhagavad-gita and studying this and other sacred texts in order to be guided to that place beneath the superficial issues that form the face of the chaos, into that place of powerful spiritual transformation that will help us move through the chaos from a position that ultimately takes us to that state of being from which one does not have to return to this chaotic material world. So that's our class for this evening. The Gita's calculations of space-time, transmigration of souls on a cosmic scale, a one-way trip to the supreme destination, and just for good measure, chaos and how to deal, and how the Gita offers us guidance through the chaos. Now is a good time for questions. So if you have any, please pop them in the Q&A box, or if you are listening after the fact, then whatever questions or comments you may have, I welcome them. Please send them to me at hari-kirtana.com. Thank you, Shanna. While I anxiously await your questions, next week, we will finish Chapter 8, the Yoga of Attaining the Supreme, knowing when it's time to go. We'll cover verses 23 through 28, and we will review the chapter from start to finish. And we have not a question, but a comment. Jill, thank you very much for your comment. What a refreshing way to look at loss as leading us to a deeper connection with the divine. I hope that my presentation of these verses did in fact help to illuminate that particular perspective. So thank you very much. Glad you found it refreshing to look at loss this way. Any other questions from the assembled multitude? Well then, it's important to know when it's time to go. Thank you all very, very much for spending this time with me. It's always a great pleasure and an honor to be able to spend this time with you. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening or rest of whatever's ahead of you. You're welcome, Tess. I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Have a nice night.